global economy is currently teetering on the edge of a total collapse because the Strait of Hormuz has been transformed into a graveyard for maritime commerce. In a stunning reversal of his America First rhetoric, President Donald Trump is now effectively begging international allies to provide naval escorts for oil tankers that are currently trapped in a logistical black hole. The reality on the ground in March 2026 is that 20% of the world's daily oil supply is being held hostage by an invisible network of Iranian naval mines and suicide drones. Despite claiming to have an unlimited supply of munitions, the United States military is discovering that it cannot secure the world's most vital energy choke point without a massive international coalition that simply does not want to form. The crisis reached a fever pitch after the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps successfully blocked the passage of 21 million barrels of oil every single day. This blockade has sent the price of Brent crude soaring toward $120 per barrel, a shock that is being felt at every gas pump from Los Angeles to London. While the White House attempts to project an image of total dominance, the behind-the-scenes diplomatic cables tell a story of desperation. The Trump administration has reached out to the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, asking them to deploy their own naval forces to guard the shipping lanes. However, these nations are looking at the smoldering ruins of the Fairmont Palm Hotel in Dubai and the charred remains of Kuwaiti government buildings, and they are saying no. The reluctance of U.S. allies is not born out of spite, but out of a cold calculation for survival. Iran has made it crystal clear that any nation that allows its territory or its military to be used in support of the American invasion will be treated as a primary target for certain death and complete destruction. For countries like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, which have built their entire national brands on being safe havens for global investment and tourism, joining this war means committing economic suicide. They have watched as their high-tech air defense systems, including the billion-dollar American Patriot and THAAD batteries, have been saturated by waves of cheap Iranian drones. When a $20,000 drone can slip through $1 million defense shield to hit a major international airport, the value proposition of American protection begins to evaporate. Trump's plea for a joint task force is falling on deaf ears because the allies realize that once they put their ships in the water, they become the next targets in a war of attrition they never asked for. The internal logic of Operation Epic Fury is beginning to crumble under the weight of a staggering munitions crisis that the White House is desperate to hide. While Donald Trump publicly boasts about a virtually unlimited supply of medium and upper-grade weaponry, the Pentagon has already burned through over $11 billion in munitions in the first 4 days alone. Of that total, nearly $6 billion was spent on missile interceptors trying to stop the relentless drizzle of Iranian projectiles. This is a war of numbers that the United States is currently losing. Iran is utilizing a saturation doctrine, firing cheap drones and older ballistic missiles to force the United States and Israel to fire million-dollar interceptors until their stockpiles are thin. As a result, critical American defense systems are under unprecedented pressure, and the industrial base is struggling to keep pace, with Trump now pressuring defense giants to quadruple production just to maintain the current tempo. The situation is so dire that the largest United States military hospital abroad has been forced to halt labor and delivery services to prepare for mass casualties in the next phase of the war. This systemic strain is exactly why Trump is now reaching out to allies with an olive branch that looks more like a white flag. He is asking for an international coalition to guard the Strait of Hormuz, yet America's most critical regional partners are retreating into a posture of strategic neutrality. The United Arab Emirates has officially denied carrying out offensive strikes against Iran, emphasizing its desire for de-escalation. Even the United Kingdom, often the most loyal American ally, initially refused to allow the use of its bases for strikes, forcing American bombers to fly 18-hour missions directly from the United States mainland. Allies are looking at the geopolitical chessboard and seeing two major pieces that make the American position untenable: Russia and China. Intelligence reports confirm that Russia is now providing Iran with real-time satellite data to target United States military assets. Meanwhile, China remains Iran's economic lifeline, purchasing 80% of its oil in yuan, effectively insulating the regime from Western sanctions. Allied leaders in the Middle East realize that joining an American-led naval task force would not only invite immediate Iranian retaliation, but would also permanently damage their relationships with Moscow and Beijing. They are no longer willing to be the collateral damage for a war of choice that has no clear exit strategy and an increasingly questionable legal basis. The primary reason for this unprecedented desertion of American leadership is the terrifying effectiveness of Iran's asymmetric warfare. For years, the Gulf states believed that billion-dollar American missile shields made them untouchable. That illusion shattered when Iranian drones and missiles began impacting the Burj Al Arab and residential neighborhoods in Abu Dhabi. The United Arab Emirates and Qatar have spent decades building cities that are marvels of global commerce, and they are not prepared to watch those cities burn for a war they believe was provoked by miscalculation. Saudi Arabia is currently conducting an investigation into whether attacks on its oil infrastructure were actually a false flag operation intended to drag them into the conflict, adding a layer of deep mistrust to the alliance. Allies are also reacting to the sheer chaos inside Iran's command structure. Since the assassination of the supreme leader, Iran has transitioned to a mosaic defense system. This means 31 autonomous units or GIR operating independently, firing missiles at will with no central authority to negotiate a ceasefire with. This is what the Israelis call a drizzle strategy, a deliberate effort to force the United States and its partners to fire expensive interceptors at a slow but steady pace until their defense stockpiles are completely drained. Trump is begging for an international task force because he realizes that the United States cannot play a game of tactical whack-a-mole with thousands of mobile launchers hidden in fortified mountains. He needs regional partners to provide naval patrols to absorb the incoming fire, but the Allies see this for what it is, an invitation to be the first line of casualties in a forever war. Furthermore, the diplomatic fracture with the United Kingdom and France has reached a breaking point. While the British Prime Minister eventually allowed defensive use of bases, he has strictly criticized the United States for engaging in a war outside of international law. Trump's scathing social media posts accusing the British of being useless allies who only join after the victory is won have only deepened the rift. The Allies are no longer following the American lead because they see a president who bypassed his own Congress and ignored his own intelligence agencies to launch a war based on gut instinct. In this climate of total unpredictability, the safest place for an ally is as far away from the American strike group as possible. The economic reality of the current situation has exposed the limits of American power in the Persian Gulf. Despite the deployment of 3 nuclear supercarriers, the Lincoln, the Ford, and now the Bush, the United States, finds itself unable to unilaterally guarantee the safety of commercial shipping in the region. Global oil markets are pricing in a reality that the White House tried to ignore. The Strait of Hormuz has become a logistical black hole. Traffic through the corridor has plummeted by 90% because insurers have canceled policies or raised premiums by as much as 50%. President Trump's recent proposal for naval escorts for oil tankers is a direct admission that his administration did not anticipate a total freeze of the world's most important energy artery. Allies such as the United Arab Emirates and Qatar are no longer willing to serve as the front line for an American military campaign they now view as an unnecessary war of choice. Their refusal to join a joint naval task force stems from the realization that American protection is not a guarantee of safety, but rather a magnet for Iranian aggression. Iran has already proved this by targeting civilian infrastructure that was once considered completely untouchable by its neighbors. The strike on a luxury hotel in Dubai's Palm Jumeirah and the drone hit on a social security building in Kuwait have sent a clear message to regional capitals. If you host the Americans, your cities will burn. Even Saudi Arabia, which reportedly lobbied for this strike behind closed doors, is now absorbing Iranian missiles in its capital and facing the possibility of its own oil production being permanently crippled. This collective retreat has left the United States isolated in a way that mirrors the failures of the 2003 Iraq invasion, but with even less international support this time. While Britain has allowed defensive strikes from its bases, the United Kingdom has not committed its remaining carrier to the fight, leaving Washington to shoulder the astronomical costs and the growing risks alone. With Russia now providing space-based targeting intelligence to help Iran find and strike American assets, the Allies realize that the technological advantage they once relied on has narrowed. They are watching as advanced American air defense systems, like the billion-dollar THAAD batteries, are being destroyed by cheap, mass-produced Iranian drones. The logic for the Allies is simple. There is no reason to commit their own navies to a conflict when the world's sole superpower is struggling to defend its own bases in their territory. The tactical success of the initial decapitation strikes has failed to produce the political outcome Washington predicted. While 40 senior leaders, including the Supreme Leader, were eliminated in the opening hours, Iran's mosaic defense strategy allows the conflict to continue independently across 31 autonomous provinces. This decentralized approach means there is no central command to negotiate with or to receive a surrender order. Consequently, the United States is now trapped in a war of attrition that is draining its military stockpiles at a staggering rate. The Pentagon has already burned through over $11 billion in the first 4 days of operations alone. This includes nearly $6 billion for missile interceptors like the Patriot and THAAD systems. The economic math of this war is fundamentally broken. The United States is firing million-dollar missiles to shoot down mass-produced drones that cost only $20,000. Allies are watching this math and calculating that the United States and Israel will eventually run out of defensive missiles. Trump's claim of an unlimited supply of munitions is being exposed as a bluff as he holds emergency meetings with defense contractors to quadruple production. In this context, his plea for allies to provide naval escorts in the Strait of Hormuz is viewed not as a leadership move, but as a cry for help. Regional partners like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar are increasingly resentful. They were led to believe this would be a swift operation lasting only 4 or 5 days, but it has now entered its second week with the intensity of combat actually increasing. These allies see that American intervention has not brought security, but has instead transformed their cities into primary targets for Iranian retaliation. The destruction of the Fairmont Hotel in Dubai and the strike on the Kuwaiti Social Security building serve as haunting evidence that hosting American assets now carries an unacceptable price tag. As the Iranian military employs its drizzle strategy to exhaust Western defenses, the Allies are choosing to step back rather than be pulled into a regional configuration they cannot control. This erosion of confidence is the true bottleneck for Operation Epic Fury, as the world's most powerful military finds itself begging for assistance from partners who are now looking for the nearest diplomatic exit. The strategic deadlock in the Persian Gulf is currently exposing the limits of American interventionism in the 21st century. As the world watches, the Strait of Hormuz remains a de facto graveyard for global trade, with the latest data showing just 3 tankers have dared to cross the waterway since Monday. This freeze is not just a military problem. It is a global economic catastrophe that Donald Trump is now attempting to solve by pressuring the very allies he previously undermined. However, his plea for a joint naval patrol is meeting a wall of resistance. The United Arab Emirates and Qatar, having witnessed their own civilian infrastructure and air bases targeted in retaliation, have realized that American protection is no longer a shield, but a bullseye. In Abu Dhabi, officials are openly expressing their frustration with the nature of the briefings coming out of the region, clarifying that they make their own decisions independently and will not be used as an offensive launchpad for a war of choice. The diplomatic vacuum is being filled by a new, more radicalized Iranian leadership. The appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader has shattered any hope for a quick negotiated settlement. Described as an even more rigid hardliner than his father, Mojtaba is presiding over a nation that has transitioned into a decentralized mosaic defense, ensuring the war can continue long after the centralized command was supposedly decapitated. As the United States military burns through nearly $11 billion in munitions in just the first 4 days of the operation, the White House is forced to hold emergency meetings with executives from defense giants like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon to replenish vanishing stockpiles. This is the reality of modern conflict. A superpower begging for the assistance of regional partners who are now more afraid of the consequences of staying involved than the cost of strategic neutrality. With the British Prime Minister and French President both condemning the war as an act outside international law, the Trump administration finds itself in a historic state of isolation. The era of the coalition of the willing has been replaced by a coalition of the reluctant, leaving the American military to face a prolonged war of attrition alone, while the global economy waits for an oil shock that could push prices well above $150 per barrel.